it might be cultural, but it might be power or inequity or powerlessness, the feeling that I have no ability to say no, no right to say no, that's built into the way this place works or the power structures that exist around you. That might be causing the people pleaser behavior.
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Paul.
Hi, I'm Graham.
And the question is, how can I be less of a people pleaser? Wonder why they picked me and you to do this one, Graham. I think they're trying to tell us.
No idea.
Yeah. This is part of our mini-series in the Question Is podcast, exploring questions that often come up when we're coaching. And we're just going to talk about that when we're faced with this question or this kind of question, because obviously it probably isn't exactly this question, how we might respond. So I'm going to let you go first, Graham, because I know if you ask you to go first, you're just going to step up and do it.
What if I say no? I might say no to it, Paul. But no, you're right, I won't.
No, I know you won't, Graham, because you are a people pleaser.
So when we're talking about people pleasers, then what's the definition of one?
In essence, I think there is a big difference between somebody who is, in psychology, we call pro-social, i.e. helpful, and a people pleaser. And the difference being the cost to them to do it. So somebody who's pro-social, somebody who is a helpful person, is doing things to help other people because they can, but not at their own expense.
Right.
Somebody who's a people pleaser is often doing these things, but at their own expense. So typically in the workplace, this is somebody who helps everybody else out and then fails at their own work type scenario.
The kind of person that comes in possibly before everybody else, does what they need, helps everybody else out, and then come the end of the day, everyone's going saying "see ya," and they're still stuck there doing the work.
And let's be really clear here: there may be times in certain roles where these traits are helpful. So I can think of coaching a manager recently who, is basically going, but I've taken over this team and I'm kind of doing their work 9 to 5 and my work in the evenings. And you go, well, sometimes as a manager, that's the way it's going to work.
Yeah.
And that's okay if you've got a plan to get them to where they need to be.
Yeah.
If that's your normal working style and that's how you think you're going to run the team, that's not very helpful. That is people pleasing.
Yeah.
But if you're going, do you know what? For the next few weeks, I am going to have to be more available. I am going to have to work a few more extra hours. That's a choice. I don't see that as people pleasing. I just think that's sometimes the way things go.
Yeah, and it was interesting when you started the conversation, you kind of talked about how it comes up in coaching, and people probably don't do I think I'm a people pleaser. And I think for me, it comes out as an exploration usually of when someone goes, how do I learn to say no more often? Or how do I learn to say no to people or to my manager or whatever it might be? But it often comes from that, I need to learn to say no.
And I have had people go, oh yeah, but I'm a bit of a people pleaser. But they're not doing that as a coaching question. They're doing that so they want you to go, no, you're not. and sometimes I think I've done the wrong thing by going, yeah.
No, I can see that.
Yeah. And they're like, ah. So it's a really interesting thing. And it's a normal reaction. We all want to be liked.
Yes. Yeah. And doesn't that go, that one of those things that goes way back in terms of wanting to be part of a tribe, isn't it? And don't want to be excluded from things. Do you think it comes from that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm assuming there's some sort of evolutionary thing that said people who got on well with other people were more likely to survive and have children. So we're likely to be related to them. And people who were a bit of an arse are more likely to have become food at some point in their life. And therefore we're not related to them. So it's kind of inherently built in that we are. But I think to some extent, people pleasing is probably pro-social behaviours with some issues behind it, or some sort of identity or challenges behind it, because most people are pro-social in some way. Most people are helpful, and there's some great work by the org psychologist Adam Grant, and I can't remember the numbers off my head, but he talks about matchers being people who are sort of reciprocal in their pro-social behaviour, being the majority of us, sort of over 50% of us typically. I'll help you because I know you're going to help me. and it's a bit of a trade. And I think I vaguely remember in some of his research, him almost sort of implying that we kind of keep a little running tally as well. It's
Okay.
like, you owe me a favour,
Yeah.
I owe you a favour. And that kind of plays out, and it works for most of us in that kind of how we get on. There are a small group, 25% of the population, who are what he calls givers, who are pro-social and therefore not expecting a huge amount of return. They're not doing it because you're going to help me. They're doing it because they can. And interestingly, if I remember rightly, what he says in his research is you can see that some of them, what he calls agreeable givers, actually suffer from that trait because they just give to anybody who wants it without any conditions. And then there's a group within that population that he calls disagreeable, agreeable and disagreeable being a personality trait, disagreeable givers, or grumpy givers as I like to call them, who do quite well out of it because they'll help people, but it's not they're being reciprocal, but they kind of put some rules around it. So I think, again, I'm trying to remember from one of his books, he talks about somebody who's really good at mentoring, but has high expectations. If you want to get mentored from them, you have to do certain things. You have to kind of get involved and follow up. And if you don't, they're not interested. And that has given a great network. And then there's a tiny group, about 20-ish%, who he calls takers, who are not pro-social and who won't help anybody. And typically, we kind of know who those people are, and human beings, we don't like them. Again, built into that evolutionary bit of when you meet a proper taker, eventually you stop helping them and you don't volunteer, and you know they're going to take the pee a little bit.
Yeah, I remember working with a guy many years ago who the phrase I always use is "had my fingers burnt with him." And me being a people pleaser that I am, I gave him a second chance. Second time around, he did exactly the same thing, and it's kind of like, okay, you're done now, because he clearly was in the relationship. It was not reciprocal. It was all about what he could get from, what could he get for nothing that would further his own his own business, his own cause. And for me, it was a 2 strikes and you're out.
Yeah. Well, I think giving somebody a second chance doesn't necessarily make you a people pleaser. It makes you just a reasonable person. But yeah, I think if you spot that behaviour ongoing, that's a different story. So I think if you sort of drop back to this, it's worth looking at this people pleaser thing, this kind of, I'm going to help people at my own expense. I may even harm my own career chances or my own ability to do my own work or achieve my own goals. Or get involved in stuff that I don't want to do. I can think of somebody I coached once who was going to events or turning up at stuff they just didn't want to be at, and they just were being asked and going, "Oh yeah, I'll go." Like then getting there, going, "What am I doing here? Why am I here? I hate this." So I think when you've got that, it's worth then thinking about what's sitting behind that.
Yes, yeah.
What's causing those behaviours?
Yeah, so it's more complex than just this. I made the point, often it comes out for me in coaching when someone goes, "How to learn to say no more?" And so it's more than just someone that says yes to stuff.
Yeah,
there's more depth to it than that, which I guess we all recognise there's going to be more depth to it.
Well, just before we get to that, I think it's worth coming back to the how to say no bit, because I think it helps people pleasers.
Okay, yeah.
But I also think it's wider than that. I think it helps people who aren't people pleasers. I think we could all do better at going, yeah, okay, I could get involved in that, but hang on, let's think about what that actually means for a second to decide if that's the right move. So we'll talk about that in a sec. We'll come back to that. Let's not forget that. But why would somebody be a people pleaser? Underlying reasons that are driving this, and there's quite a few.
So one reason is it's kind of hardwired into us. So if we take that as a starting point,
and so I think you have to take that at 2 levels. One is there's a personality bit. So we're all kind of trying to be helpful, supportive, because the being accepted, belonging, fitting into the group is hardwired into us. There's also some cultural stuff that some people might find that they struggle with. There are certain cultures, national cultures, organizational cultures that put high value on helping other people that can easily be exploited by other people around you.
Yeah, just thinking actually, I think about a group I worked with recently, and there's definitely some of that cultural stuff going on in the group where, it's almost they're being deferential to more senior people.
Yes.
So whereas we might go in kind of in the culture that we're in, there may be we may ask a question, we may challenge,
Yeah, I mean, in this organisation, a little bit of deference to the senior people would be nice, just the once.
No idea what you mean, Paul.
Yeah.
Anyway, come on, hurry up.
sorry. But you get what I mean. And so you can see this playing out in national cultures. That
Yes.
some cultures that are more familiar, cultures that have got more family expectations, place those kind of expectations on people. Cultures that are more deference to status or age, cultures that revere older people, you're more likely not to be able to say no to them because it's a cultural expectation. And then there's cultures with what's known technically as high power distance. So, if people are seen to be more powerful or perceived to be more powerful, that changes the status relationship. Whereas you go, here in the UK, actually, we're quite an informal culture, and you can kind of talk to it. I mean, there is a bit of it, but you can kind of talk to everybody. You see that a bit in America, that they're a very informal culture. I always think in America, the cultural thing is they're very informal at times. I was trying to explain this to somebody the other day, and my sort of summary of it is up until the point a decision is made in an American culture, everyone gets to say, you can sort of say, I don't know if I could get involved in that. I'm really busy at the moment. But then when a senior person then makes a decision, that informality in American culture disappears and the boss has decided comes in. So it's a kind of so there's all that stuff playing out about why someone might do that.
And interesting that I guess the thing where I've seen a cultural thing where someone's more likely to say less is where it's literally a ranked organisation. So one I saw was with a police force. And in the room were 3 different ranks. And it was in essence, we were playing what would you do? We're playing a game demo. And in the room, you've got the lowest rank wouldn't say what their response was or wouldn't engage without looking over to the more senior person who looked over to the most senior person. And then the most senior person said what they said, and the other two, yes, we agree with that.
I always remember seeing a poster many years ago that just had a thing on it that when I want your opinion, I'll let you know who it is. I think it was a picture from The Godfather or something on it. But that sort of thing playing out. So you get that stuff playing out.
So because there's some cultural stuff then definitely, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think that plays out in some of the organisations I've seen. That plays out. I'd not thought of it in that example. That's a really good example. But it plays out a couple of ways in things I've seen. One is very powerful senior people who people don't necessarily either have a good relationship with or feel safe around, can cause some of these behaviours.
Yeah.
But in the other one I've seen, and I want to pick your brains on this because you've worked with more of these organisations than I have, very sort of public body type, very social driven organizations where the kind of culture is almost a powerless culture. I don't have a right to say no.
Yeah.
We just have to do stuff.
Yeah. I think particularly that kind of public type organization in the UK, like the NHS or local government, I think definitely within those kind of organizations, whether it's changing now a bit, maybe, but I think certainly in some of those organizations, there is that you're more senior than me. Therefore, there's a power that comes with that position that you've got that means I can't say no to it.
And that sort of brings us to the next group of reasons. So, it might be cultural, but it might be power or inequity or powerlessness, the feeling that I have no ability to say no, no right to say no, that's built into the way this place works or the power structures that exist around you. That might be causing the people pleaser behavior.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that also might be you join an organization from new, kind of you're on day one, and maybe you're feeling your way, and you're trying to think. Typically, in most organizations, we should be deferential to a more senior person. So it might not actually be the culture of the organization, but it's almost that belief we have that that's how it works. Yeah. Again, whether that's changed over the years, I always think about my mum talking about how back in her childhood, back in her day, if policeman was walking down the street, you were doing something wrong, you'd be terrified and you get clipped round the ear, you'd go home, you get clipped round the ear from your parents. But fundamentally, there was a level of respect for positions like that, but also in organisations. When my mum went into employment, respect for a manager, and I wonder if that's changed over the years.
I think it
It
definitely
means
has.
we don't have the same levels of respect, do we?
In
that
our
way.
culture, I think it's changed. I mean, whether it's changed in all cultures, that's a different story. But I think in the UK culture, that kind of there's much more equality in position in the UK culture now than even when I was growing up. I think there was kind of more deference in our culture than there is now. So you've got the cultural stuff. You've got that kind of inequality and power piece playing into this. Obviously, the third one is very personal to somebody around self-esteem, conflict avoidance, maybe even anxiety. People worrying about stuff. Again, I'm sure you've come across this in your coaching. I certainly have. People who are genuinely concerned that if they don't do all the things they're being asked to do, their job's at risk.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, definitely kind of I guess a badge of kind of that confidence. I'm not confident to do it for a number of reasons, or there'll be a specific reason for an individual, but there's a number of reasons that often sit behind that.
And I think the two big ones that strike me is one, fear of being found out. And the other is if I don't help these people, they won't like me.
Yes, yeah.
And I think when you get to those two, you then get to this kind of core argument of, well, that is not about people pleasing. It's about restoring your confidence in the ability to have a proper conversation with the people around you about workload and what's reasonable and what you should take on and what you shouldn't take on.
I think the workload one's interesting actually, because it's an example I share a lot when we're doing kind of programs and things. And we get onto this topic, and I think about my, excuse me, I think about one of my first roles.
Oh, that's good. I was about to say, podcast isn't time to do this. Is not an appraisal, Graham.
Where the guy that would give me work, I was busy. My day was full as it was, but every time he brought more work out to me, I would say yes to it.
Yeah. Not an uncommon thing early in someone's career.
Early in career, yeah. And I respected the guy. It wasn't. He was a great manager and all that. So it wasn't there was none of that kind of, I guess, that fear involved with it. But my fundamental belief was, he knows how busy I am. So why does he keep giving me more stuff? Because surely he knows, I was there before he would start work. I was there when he left work. And I think it was a real eye-opener for me very early on in my career. And, and I guess I was pleased I got it early in my career, because where we worked was on a high street in the town that I lived in. And he was going out for dinner with some friends one night, and he saw the office light was on. This is like about 7:30 at night or something. The next morning he came in and went, "We need to have a talk." I went, "Well, what about?" And he went, "You were working late last night, weren't you?" I went, "Yeah." And he went, "You work late a lot, don't you?" And I went, "Yeah." And he went, "Never realised." and I had this belief that he knows how busy I am. Why does he keep giving me more work? But fundamentally, he gave me work, and I delivered it on time. And he had the belief that if I was struggling, I'd talk to him. And it was just that mismatch of me early in my career, him at the stage in his career, that would just assume if someone's busy, they would talk to you about it. So I think there is something in that kind of the workload piece, the stage of career and all that adds another layer to this.
I can think of a bit, and it's further on in my career. It wasn't my first job, so it's quite sort of mid-career, but it's the first big role I'd probably taken. Well, that was the first big role, but the first big role of that type I'd taken on. I'd gone to work in a fairly small company with some amazing, visionary founders who were doing some brilliant things. And I learned really quickly there that these guys would come in, some of the people around me would come in with ideas and thoughts and problems, and would come in and go, "Why don't we do this?" And you get all excited and go, "Yeah, we could do this. This would be great. This would be brilliant. We could go and launch a new feature in the product." They were expecting me as a senior person to go back and say, "Right, okay, well, if we're doing that, we're not doing this.
Yes,
I'm going to manage." And I didn't get that for probably the first 6 months. So like you, I just went, yeah, we could do that. And then we could do that. And then we could do that. And then you go, oh,
how are we going to do all this?
yeah. And I think that's a really powerful learning. And the thing I learned very quickly in that role, there's a mindset thing that sits behind that as a to be a fair employee, and it's two parts to it. One is they absolutely have the right to ask.
Yes.
It's an unreasonable expectation for them to be fully across my workload and how I feel and the implications of everything they talk to me about. I'm a grown up. I need to be part of this conversation too. They have a right to ask, and I shouldn't get upset when they do.
Yeah.
At the same time, I have absolutely every right to go, hang on, stop. If I do that, it impacts this, and this.
Yeah.
And the thing I found out as I got good at this, as I learned to do this better and manage upwards, as we sometimes call it, is that very often really good, charismatic people around you may come up with lots of great ideas because they're trying to help. But very rarely is the idea they had in the shower this morning better than the ones we spent weeks on in the strategic plan. And on the few times it is better, it's so obvious. Actually having the conversation about, yes, we should do that, let's drop this, and this to make space for it, is really easy. But most of the time I would go, oh yeah, we could do that. Does that mean we're not doing this? And they'd go, whoa, no, we're doing this. This is the important bit. What I just talked to you about, ignore that. Pretend that never happens.
And I think, I can think about that at an individual level, where I worked with someone once, and it would be, if you were in the office and they'd had that thought in the shower, you would be the person they would come to. And they'd be full of excitement of this new idea. That's what they did. They were very
Why were they having showers at the office?
just the kind of place it was.
Yeah, different kind of working place. But yeah, okay, fair enough.
And what I learned very quickly was this: the guy was coming out because I was the person in the office.
Yes,
didn't mean I had to say yes to it, and it didn't mean I actually was the person who would work on it. And what I learned was, if you kind of then turn around to me and went, great idea, happy to work on it, but I've got all this other stuff I need to do today while I'm in the office because I'm not out with customers, etc., etc. Is this idea you've got more or less important than stuff on my list?
Yes,
and have what I'd call a grown-up conversation, which what I recognise now at this stage of my career actually is just a conversation we should be having all the time. There's nothing grown up about it. It just should, in my opinion, should be the way that we work with people. What it meant is you have a conversation that goes, actually, the starting point was always, are you coming to talk to me because I'm the only person who can do it? Or are you coming and talking to me because I'm the only person in the office?
Yeah.
So
are you coming to talk to me because actually you've talked to me 10 times in the past and I've created a pattern that says you talk to me and you come to me because you know it gets done. You've never even thought of the implications.
Yeah, we create habits and routines, don't we?
Yeah, because I think there is a real struggle that some people have of, I'm not the only person, and I've seen them walk past 3 of my colleagues.
Yeah.
But the real reason they've come to you is because you, A, say yes, and B, probably do it really well.
You get shit done. And so that was what I worked out with this guy was, if it's because I'm the only person in the office, then it's I've got this other stuff on while I'm here today. Is that more or less important? Because if it's potentially more important, maybe I can move some stuff around. If it's less important, either we book in and I'll do it another time, or you find somebody else. If it's you're the only person that can do it, that's a different conversation. But it meant I was more in control of the work that came my way. And sometimes there are times when you work in longer hours because you're the only person that can do it, as opposed to you working long hours because you've just said yes to everything.
Well, the other thing is there's kind of a piece that plays out there about how do we reprioritize this? So how do we go, I might be the only person who can do it, but do you really need it today?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I need it for a week on Tuesday. All right. Well, actually, I've got time next week. I'll do it next week.
Yeah.
So I think this comes back to learning how to say no is a really useful skill. And there's a couple of things to think about here. You cannot say no to anything if you don't know what your priorities are. What's your workload?
Yeah.
You started that. I've got these other things to do that I need to do today. If you don't know that, if you're not in control of what's important to me, what have I got to achieve, what are my actual deadlines, if you don't understand your task list, how do you know if that is more or less important than what you've got to do? That's number one. Number two, when you think about these things, be careful that you differentiate in your head between I'm saying no to helping you on this task. I'm not saying no to you.
So what's the difference between that then?
Graham, I would love to help you with this. I'll always help you with this. I can't help you with this right now because I'm too busy.
Yeah.
But if I wasn't busy, I would help you. So, and I think there's two sides to that. One is how you explain it to the person. So, I'm supportive of you. I just can't help you with this task because I'm too busy.
Yeah.
But the other is in my head, I'm not rejecting Graham. I'm rejecting work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if I think I'm rejecting Graham, the emotional cost of that to me is incredibly high. Because I like Graham and I'd like Graham to like me. This is just a made-up example.
Obviously. I say, it's not what you normally say.
Just for the benefit of the podcast. But you get what I mean? There's a different thing that plays out in your head. I'm not saying no to you, the human. I'm saying no to this piece of work. Yes. And then I think there are three strategies that work really well for saying no. We've covered one, which I call the reprioritize strategy, which is let me understand how important this is, and then we're going to do a reprioritize. If this is less important than my work, my reprioritize is you need to do it or find somebody else.
Yeah.
If this is more important than my work, particularly if you're my boss, can you help me reprioritize my work either by deferring or delegating some of the work I have to do so it all gets done? So I call that the prioritize. There's a trade. Of course, I'll do that for you. By the way, while I'm doing that, can you do this for me? Because if you can give me something only I can do, and take it off my plate, but I can give you something, particularly something that's going to take me ages and you can do quickly.
Yeah.
Everybody wins. And a classic example of that with a manager. I'll go away, I'll do that report, I'll sort all that stuff out for you. So you've got your slides for the big meeting next week because we know you can't work PowerPoint.
Yeah.
I'll do that. Could you phone this department and unblock this thing for me?
Yeah.
Because it's a 10-minute phone call for you and it's hours of lobbying for me.
Yeah. So again, recognise also where some of that power sits, isn't it? You can use that, you can trade on that.
And then the third strategy is just explain. Go, look, actually, this is what I've got on my plate. This is where I think the priorities are right now. This is what I think is important, and I don't understand how that fits.
Yeah.
And the explain strategy is really good because either they will get educated and go, yeah, you're right, or you will get educated and go, oh no, I understand where it fits now. Yeah, that is really important. I need to do it. Yeah. And it's picking the strategy. Rule of thumb: explain. I think works best down.
Yeah.
So when people who work for you come and say, "Can you do this?" and you're going, "I'm not going to do that." Explain, educate them, take the opportunity to teach.
Yeah.
Reciprocal tends to work best sideways. You might get a favour out your boss, but if it's your boss's 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 boss and you try reciprocal, you're probably going to lose. And the reprioritize tends to work best upwards.
Yeah.
So where does this fit in the priority list? But they're just rules of thumb. I think they can all work in different circumstances.
Yeah, but it's good to go. There's if you like, you've got three different strategies there. Bear in mind they might all work, but typically one might work best with a different level of, if thinking internally in an organization, with a different level within the organization.
And I think that comes back to most of understand why you're a people pleaser, understand what is driving you to go yes to everything, be a bit better at saying no to some things, but also understand that, your ability to be loved in the organization, your ability to be liked isn't because you're saying yes to everything.
Yeah.
It's got much more to do with the quality of what you deliver, the way you work with other people. And that means you don't have to say no to everything, but you don't have to say yes to everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I really like that phrase that you mentioned earlier, that they, recognize people have the right to ask, but you do have the right to say no. Does that, just out of interest, Paul, will that work with my wife then?
Yeah, I think that's a good point to stop the podcast.
Thanks for that.
Next time on The Question Is.
Because business believes that busyness is where the value is, and actually I'd rather you take a little bit longer in the thinking and planning phase and then go hell for leather and deliver. And I bet you if you did that, you'd achieve a lot more quickly.
To find out how Thinking Focus can unlock the potential within your organization, go to www.thinkingfocus.com, where you'll discover more about the work we do, helping our clients increase productivity and enable change.